Okay, so a lot of our chicken classes call for breaking down chicken in advance. And what that means is simply cutting the chicken into parts. You can absolutely ask your butcher to do it for you. However, it's also a really empowering and not that hard task that when you learn how to work with the whole chicken, I think totally elevates what you can do in the kitchen. So first rule of thumb, you want to buy a smaller chicken. Some that's going to be about 3.5 to 4 pounds versus larger than that. Bigger birds aren't going to be as tender and are not going to taste as good. So this is a 4-pound whole chicken. I'm going to be cutting it into parts. So the neck bone runs through the back, the breastbones are up the front, and the thighs connect at the rear down here. So when I cut it into parts, I'm going to take the neck bone away, cut the thigh here, flip it over, cut the wings off, and then split the breast in half. So I'm going to turn my camera down so you can keep an eye on what's happening there. Okay. So first thing to identify are the oysters. The oysters are these 2 bumps right here, which are some of the very best meat on the whole chicken. We don't want to cut those away. So often what I advise people to do is to cut the neck bone just on top of the oysters and then come in and cut the tail. So we'll cut this in a strip, cut this in a triangle, and then we'll be able to split open the breastbone. It doesn't really matter what knife you're using here. The bones we're cutting are very small and delicate. So I pulled out a chef's blade. I also like to use kitchen shears when we get down to the tail. Most critically, I'm going to position the knife in between my hands. When I work with kids, we call this the bridge cut. Because if I was cutting like this, there's a concern that your knife could come down and hit your finger. So put my fingers over the knife, and I'm just using the point to cut into the cavity of the chicken. Cutting straight like so. I'm going to bend this back. A good friend likes to call it Mortal Kombat. Move, pinch that away. And then the oysters are right here. To spatchcock, I'm going to come on top of the bird and think about almost like I'm giving it CPR or a massage. Just flattening that, like so. So that takes a 4-pound chicken that would cook in about 70 minutes and brings it down to cooking in about 45. So now I'm going to flip around and cut out the tail feather. Now remember, I want to avoid the oysters. I'm going to use shears for this. So I cut this into a Y-shaped bone. Cut it at the bias. So keeping the oysters intact and cutting off those last little bones. So open this up. I often like to bring this over to the sink and just rinse it away. This stuff isn't good. It's not the worst if you eat it, but it's not tasty. So I like to rinse all the little stuff away like so. And then ta-da. So that is a spatchcock chicken. And you can do the exact same thing to a turkey. Obviously, it's going to be pretty hard if you're working with like a 40-pound turkey, but odds are this year we are not working with 40-pound turkeys. So if I want to go further and cut this into parts, what I'm going to do is just cut right here, so to separate the drumstick and the thigh, drumstick and thigh, cut up here to separate the wing, and then split the breast in half. So I want to keep the fat attached. When we're browning our meat, that fat is going to be what, see how quickly that comes away? The fat is going to be what we render in. You actually don't have to add any fat to the pan at all. So just like so. Now the wings are the hardest. You want to take care that you're not using the point of your knife and going into the breast meat. So bend this out, and I'm going to use shears and position my knife this way. And I'm just cutting right between. And remember, I have broken down a lot of chickens. So there is certainly a bit of discovery to figuring out where do I cut. But if you're trying to cut somewhere and it's simply not breaking, move your knife or your tool slightly. There we go. Now I'm going to cut away this last bit here at the bottom. I'll just use shears since they're in the hand.